Today, I once again resume my never-ending quest to review every Souls-like game out there. Today, we are taking a look at Salt and Sanctuary, an indie title released back in 2016 by Ska Studios. Similar to Hollow Knight, this game takes place on a 2D plane and mixes elements of Metroidvanias and the Souls series. Is this another decent Souls-like, or is it just one of the many mediocre titles? When you start a game, you get a pretty typical character created for games like this. You can customize the way you look as well as a starting class. I picked the Paladin for mine as it comes with heavy armor and a shield. Even though the shield didn't block all physical damage, it was very useful for parrying enemies. Speaking of the combat, it's pretty good, especially early on. There's a good amount of weight to your strikes as well as different combos to play with. Like I said, I mainly use my shield to parry enemies, but eventually I transitioned into a two-handed great hammer and great mace user. I also ditched the heavy armor to be much lighter on my feet to help with speed as well as my rolling ability. The bosses, however, are a mixed bag to me. Many of them seem to have one or two attacks that either get faster or add in another strike as you drain their health. Some are a decent challenge while others are just incredibly cheap. Unfortunately, I didn't get the same level of satisfaction when defeating these. When you die, you lose all of your salt and need to go back to the location to defeat an enemy and get it back. However, you have a second currency known as gold, which you only will lose a small percentage of. Basically, a mysterious clerk that revives you takes that amount from you. Gold is also used to purchase items from merchants as well. The leveling up system is a bit unique compared to the traditional skill trees. When you have enough salt, you can gain a point to put into your skill web. These skills can increase one of your stats or even allow you to wear certain levels of armor and weapons. Early on, it takes a lot of salt in order to level up, as most enemies don't drop much. Later on, however, salt becomes much easier to acquire, lowering the amount of grind you'll need to be doing if you want to level up. Personally, I always found the level of equipment to be strange. Sometimes you'll find a level 1 shield being far more useful than a level 4 one. Usually, the highest level items are supposed to be the stronger ones, theoretically, but it isn't always like that. I'm not sure what's up with the inconsistency. Even though the levels of equipment can be inconsistent, it's still rewarding to explore the levels. Similar to the original Dark Souls, you'll find various secrets and shortcuts throughout the game. You can also end up meeting some useful NPCs who have their own side quests to partake in. I definitely would recommend talking to everyone just to see what you can possibly get out of it. If it's one thing this game nails right away, it's the atmosphere. I love the dark and gritty feel of it all, which is complemented by both the music and the aesthetics. The soundtrack is full of guitar riffs, which do a great job giving the game a sense of dread. While most of the game can look dull as a result of the lack of color, there are some moments later on that actually have some vibrancy. Like many games of this ilk, the game can be pretty cryptic on what you can and can't do. Heck, it doesn't even have a map of any kind. Even Hollow Knight had a map system. This is fine for the Souls series, but for a Metroidvania like this, that's an odd exclusion. For example, you have these sanctuaries that act as your bonfires. From here, you can use idols to add various NPCs to them like a blacksmith or a merchant. There was honestly no mention of this at all, and I found this out when looking online. This is a pretty awesome feature, so why they wanted to keep this hidden, I have no idea. Seems to be a constant theme with the game, but whatever. A cool thing about the sanctuaries is the ability to proclaim your faith to various gods. Depending on who you choose will determine the kinds of bonuses you have. I didn't really experiment with this system too much and just stuck with the basic faith, but it definitely is an interesting concept on paper. If you guys have done this and found something really cool here, let me know in the comments below. The platforming, unfortunately, is mediocre. There will be many times where you will go through platforms when trying to jump on them, like it's some kind of broken NES game. In the early game, you may not notice it as much as first. However, it becomes a bigger problem towards the end game, where the game requires far more precision on jumps, which this game just doesn't have. Heck, some jumps you can only really make if you are wearing light armor, as your weight will affect your jumping ability. Your character also just grabs the ledge whenever he or she feels like it. Again, not sure what's up with that. Honestly, this game is a tale of two halves. The first half is solid enough with good combat and atmosphere, focuses on what the game does right. The second half, however, becomes far more fixated on platforming for some reason, and the level design takes a sharp nosedive. Enemies are placed in the most obnoxious locations, mainly in the way of you trying to reach a platform. With how imprecise the platforming is, the game does a bad job of hiding this issue. In addition, leaps of faith become way too common, a huge issue I have with many platformers in general. The difficulty is just all over the place. The late game will constantly hit you with difficulty spike in the form of a cheap boss or bad NES level design. Then you'll encounter the next boss that ends up being defeated in your first try. It's very reminiscent of the drop in quality in the late game from the first Dark Souls, but just worse. just worse. Overall, I can only slightly recommend it. Considering the positive reviews for this game, I was honestly disappointed. I expected far more from this title, and early on I thought it would have been a classic. The atmosphere, aesthetics, music, and combat are all really good. However, the late game level design, the bad platforming, and overall inconsistent difficulty made it less enticing to complete. After this review, I unfortunately don't see myself coming back to this one. Either way, I hope you did enjoy the review. More reviews will be coming in the future. And as always, this is Powerhouse, signing off.